So welcome, everyone. This talk tonight is co-sponsored by the Gardeners of Simsbury and the Simsbury Land Trust, as well as the Simsbury Public Library. So we're very happy to have Susan Messina and her, former student, Chelsea Armistad, and many of you know Susan. She is a professor at Trinity in applied science, in neuroscience and psychology. She's also on the open space committee in Simsbury. She's the coordinator, some of you may have seen her a few weeks ago, of Old Growth Forest Network, and she and Chelsea have collaborated together on a new survey that both of them will be talking about. She's also Susan has more energy than pretty much anyone I know, and she's involved in climate change, community support, and protecting the health of our town and our state and beyond. So I'm going to bring on Susan, and she's going to introduce Chelsea.
Thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. And I'm so thrilled to be sharing this presentation tonight with Chelsea. Chelsea graduated from Trinity College in 2018, and I just happened to see her in the library, in fact, shortly after you graduated, shocked. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I live in Terriffill." And I was like, great, because I had just received a fellowship at Harvard to do a sabbatical on forests and brain health. And I said, "Chelsea, I need a research assistant for this sabbatical I'm doing at Harvard. Do you want to work with me on this?" So we've been really keeping in touch on this topic for a long time. Some real common interests, and we've done some presentations before at Trinity in honor of the bicentennial. So I want to thank Chelsea for being here tonight, and I will turn the microphone over to her very shortly. But I also want to thank all of you for being here tonight, because this is a topic of really the utmost importance, and I'm going to try and relay that to you as best I can. So I start every talk that I give with two exact things, which are the driving force behind my life. And the first thing is that we need nature. It's not optional. That seems fairly self-evident, but sometimes we need to be reminded of that because we get distracted by a lot of other things. And the second thing is we really need healthy brains in order to make good decisions. So these two things, neither one of them are optional. And for the background, I put this beautiful forest ecosystem and this human brain with sort of a Big Bang kind of image behind it. And both of these are incredibly complex, resilient, highly evolved systems. And I think as a neuroscientist, I have somewhat of an advantage because I know that I can't understand the human brain. And the more I've learned about the complexity and diversity of forest ecosystems, there's also an incredible amount that we don't know about natural systems as well. So one of the things I'm going to be talking to you about tonight are wildlands, which are areas where nature is allowed to evolve and adapt. Why we need wildlands, where are they, and why are they so important? And what Chelsea's going to be talking about is a public survey we did a few years ago about people's attitudes towards public and private forests and what they think about natural areas, for which I'll use the term wildlands tonight. So the elephant in the room is that we're often talking about green space or forests, and these words are much too vague to get at the heart of the matter of where are the natural areas that are the self-sustaining ecosystems that keep all of us going? So that's one issue. And the second issue is green space is so vague that it could be either some grass with a bench, or it could be an old growth forest. So as you can imagine, the benefits of those two things are vastly different, either for our planetary stability or for people's health, for their mental health, for the beauty that we see, for inspiration, etc. So what we really need to think about is what we're doing, why, where, and how. And with respect to this question, I've really divided the landscape into sort of three buckets. Where are we prioritizing nature? Where are we doing research, because the pursuit of knowledge is critical for so many things? And what areas are we using for our resources? So our food, our fiber, our houses, renewable energy, roads, infrastructure, all of that stuff. So all of these things are needed. And but we can't forget, while we're thinking about housing, renewable energy, roads, all of that stuff, we can't forget about the need to continue to understand the world that we live in, and we can't forget that nature is our common lifeline. And I'm replacing the word nature with the word wildlands, which is related to this big report that was put out last year called Wildlands in New England, Past, Present, and Future. Has anyone heard of it? Couple people. So this is a big collaboration. More than 150 individuals and groups contributed to it in New England, and it wanted to look at where are the areas that have a current intent for that area to be like a nature preserve or like a mini national park. And the current intent had to be written down so you'd know that the intent was there. And so after a big research project, this and has a whole bunch of data and resources, I have some executive summaries that look like this, that are over on the side over there. If you'd like to bring one home, you can check out the executive summary, and all of the resources are fully available online. So in this report, there's a very specific definition of wildlands, and that is tracts of land of any size and current condition that are permanently protected from development, so conservation land, in which management is explicitly intended to allow natural processes to prevail with minimal human interference. And it also acknowledges that we've been living on the land for millennia. We can coexist without always dramatically altering the structure and composition and function of the land. So wildlands can allow trails, they can allow people, they can allow some subsistence kind of gathering, they can allow treating invasives, they can allow a whole bunch of minimal human interference things. They can allow hunting. And so this report compiled all the land that could be found in New England that has an intent similar to this, with various lands having various different things that are allowed, like hunting or snowmobiles or things like that. So that's the definition of wildlands. And I'm going to just briefly tell you why they're so important. The first reason is just, nature has a right to exist. I don't know if people have heard of the rights of nature movement. Just can a river just be allowed to be a river? So what is the intrinsic value of just these natural areas? Allowing the full web of life to adapt and express itself and evolve is essential for maintaining and increasing biodiversity. These are critical areas in terms of mitigating climate change and for stabilizing our climate. Massive regional cooling power is held in these wild areas. They are part of a resilient landscape. If you look at what's rated in terms of climate resilience on a scale I won't get into right now, the wildlands that we found are 92% more resilient than other conserved land. This also offers quiet space for all of us to reflect and just get away, spiritual and physical renewal, ecological references, so control groups. If we're doing research, we need control groups. Otherwise, it's not science, it's just doing stuff. And if you've heard of the effort to protect 30% of our land and water by 2030, and other estimates are often called like half Earth. The Earth needs half. These wild areas form part of that network of where are we simply protecting natural areas. So this is really critical. And what I've come to appreciate in the past few years when I've been collaborating with and speaking at conferences with researchers in physics, ecologists from the Amazon, is that these intact areas with the evolved genetic knowledge of how to move water across the land are absolutely critical in terms of protecting our water and regulating the local climate and stabilizing the global climate. It's fundamental, and we're not taking it properly into account. So, what we really need to start talking about very seriously is where is a strategic network of nature that is for all of us and everything else. And this is not just for scientists, this is for the public, because scientists can say things, but until enough people raise their voice, scientists can be ignored or sidelined or shunned or slandered. So unless regular people start having the courage to speak up for nature just because it's really important, we will continue to not have the lifeline that we need. So I come from a biomedical background, and so my point now is if there's a natural area that doesn't have invasives, and it's intended to be a natural area, don't mess around with it unless there's a really good reason to, unless that area is intended to produce wood, or that area is intended to be a research area, and you have control groups. Otherwise, we need to leave natural areas as natural areas and allow them to be part of a self-sustaining network that itself is then sustaining the areas that we need for our farms, for the areas that we're getting resources from. This is the backbone of that support system. And this is a little, I don't know, it's not a video, a little animation of what is really the power of the biota, the natural systems. It's not just their carbon accumulation. One of the most powerful things that the biota is doing, see if I can do this again, is it's providing a buffer system against extremes. Without the biota, we would either be frozen or boiling. And so carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases can dial the temperature up and down, but only the biota is creating a buffer system against these extremes. So I would just ask you to do a little thought experiment and imagine that we covered the earth with solar panels and we got our carbon dioxide levels down. Do you think that that would be a stable, living planet? We need the biota to maintain the stability of moving water across land and mitigating extreme events. And there's so many, mathematical ways that this can be expressed, and historical examples, and examples even now of areas that did extreme development at the interface between the land and the water, and what used to be regular summer storms now is very severe, infrequent events that are devastating. And this is I'll just read this after this conference I was at, that throughout history, human interaction with ecosystems has been dominated by local needs and visions. It's only recently that it became possible to begin quantifying the planetary significance of the ecosystem's stabilizing impact on the environment and climate. Yet the area occupied by natural ecosystems continues to shrink. The climate problem is very much about water transport and cloud formation. as well as global strategies of wild nature preservation and climate stabilization, and overcoming traditional separations and exchanging new evidence on how human activities on land affect rain, clouds, climate, and our overall well-being. Exploited biological systems contribute to climate destabilization, whereas natural ecosystems under minimal human pressure are self-sustainable and actively contribute to climate stabilization. Simply stopping the ongoing destruction of the remaining global wilderness areas can slow down climate destabilization. And international protection and ambitious investigations are key for preserving human identity, both as a biological species and as a highly developed, ethically and intellectually competent society. So, back to these three buckets, I think of wildlands sort of as areas where we should first do no harm, do what we need to, but allow nature to thrive. And this is really our essential lifeline of land and water. In terms of research, I'm a scientist. I do research, protocols, control groups, etc. So this is where we're going to gain knowledge and do better. But we need data collection, baselines, protocols. And for our resources, we just need to be smart about how we're using them and realize that, if we can have local integrated systems and community support systems, that would be our best path forward. So this wildland issue is really the issue that we're talking about the least. So I'd like to now turn it over to Chelsea, who is going to share what we found on our public survey. And this will be due to a computer glitch.
Yep.
We're
going to swap.
We had to swap.
Do you need this plugged in still?
Nope. Okay. Here you go.
Thank you so much. All right. Haven't done one of these presentations in a while. It's been quite a minute. So thank you for all coming. Like Dr. Messino said, my name is Chelsea Armistead. Recently hyphenated my name. I will be Chelsea Armistead McCrae. So thank you for coming and listening to our talk. So we did a survey back in 2019 to assess what the public values were and what the public knew about public forests and private forests and how funding would be used to support and protect those forests, as well as some other questions. So those are the questions that we wanted to investigate. So does the public appreciate forests and their values? Does the public support similar different values for public and private forests, and what are their priorities? And what kind of new science and new challenges are we experiencing, and how can public forests best serve the public now and in the future? So this was essentially the beginning introduction to our survey, and the goal of our survey was just to better understand, like I said, the priorities of the public and the knowledge of what they had on both public and private forests. I won't read all of that, but it is important to know that the majority of forest land in southern New England is owned privately. That's a really high number and a high percentage, and so having it being privately owned means that it cannot be protected. And so we want to know from the public if they would be willing to support public funding, such as taxes, and donations to help forest management, conservation, and other activities. So initially, we had a pool of over 6,500 recipients who had to initially answer a question: do you care about the forests in southern New England? And after that, we had two pools. We had two separate batches. Essentially, we started out with that and ended up with a little over 2,000 respondents. And everything was completely anonymous. Our survey was approved through Trinity College's Institutional Review Board. And we used a consultant company to use this as a basis to get our participants for the survey. So again, our survey was to better understand the public's priority and knowledge, and to answer those questions that we wanted to investigate. So, yep, I actually wanted to skip over that. I thought I deleted it. So this is the demographics. As you can see, the highest group was ages 30 to 45. And that was actually very shocking to Dr. Messino and I, as the participants aged from under 18 to over 60. So it was shocking to us, but it also spoke volumes about what groups are finding that forests are most important to them. And in one of our questions, we asked what their median income was, and it was between $40,000 and $99,000, which was lower than average than Connecticut's median family of two income, which is $78,833. So that was something that was quite shocking to us both. Also, there were more female respondents than male respondents in the survey. So what we found out was that the greatest concerns that those of New England, that they're very concerned about water quality, damage to water quality, the wetlands and vernal pools. They're worried about logging and herbicides and pesticide use, as well as disturbance by human intervention, such as like dirt biking or leaving garbage on the paths, things that would really disturb the ecosystems of those forests and of those wildlands. And also habitat fragmentation. It was very surprising again to us, not only with our participants, but that they're really not concerned about themselves. Personal risks such as ticks, poison ivy, things that would be detrimental to them were not of the greatest concern. It was more about the actual quality and preservation of these spaces. So in finding out about public funding for private forest land, we found that there was a strong support for biodiversity and carbon sequestration, as well as to protect clean water and reduced flooding. There was also again, strong support for public funding for private forest land in careful management of the invasive species, as well as recreation, natural study, and tourism. So again, just like Dr. Messino was mentioning, studies done by scientists to help find out what is best to help preserve these areas, how these areas are working amongst themselves to, again, produce carbon sequestration, how their own ecosystems are being self-sustained. And in this question, we asked, do you think that the public forest land should be prioritized as a nature preserve? And again, as you can see, it's just very, very much supported. So these areas and those of the public are strongly supporting that these areas need to be protected, they need to be preserved, and it's important to them. It's not about necessarily using these areas for logging or for using them for recreation or building. You know, these spaces want to be preserved. And I think having this data to back it up is really strong in supporting these efforts that Dr. Messino and many other scientists, and hopefully all of you here, are willing to come forward and speak on. So the important, again, access to these natural forests were, again, very high for personal interests, having access to a forest nearby, and important and for scientists, educators, and children who need to study nature. So I'm an early childhood educator. I teach preschool. Currently, I'm at Wintonberry in Bloomfield, but formerly I was teaching at Flamig Farm and at Holcomb Farm. And I can tell you right now, 100%, that children and the way that they utilize their energy and utilize a space outdoors versus inside a classroom for a majority of their day is night and day. It is so interesting to see the way that their creativity is used in outdoor spaces versus in an inside classroom, how they're able to interact with the materials that are provided to them versus what's out in nature. I had a lot of projects where we worked on building dams and using walking sticks. We built boats out of the materials. And it's just so interesting to see how a young child's mind is able to take something that's not a bright primary color or something that is meant for utilizing like a baby doll or a fork or a spoon, and using materials such as sticks, leaves, and using their imaginations to create these things. I find that today in my classroom, a lot of my students have a hard time using their imagination, thinking about things outside of the box. And so when you provide them with things that have a use, they're really only using them for that use. So when I was teaching on Flaming Farm and at Holcomb, we were able to talk about different types of leaves. We were able to help them identify different types of trees. We did a lot of mindfulness walks and sitting. So when you're out in nature, I'm sure you've heard of forest bathing or forest therapy. We integrated that at a very age-appropriate level. So just being able to ask them open-ended questions about, I noticed this tree over here. I noticed the wind blowing, things that are directly connected to the senses. And even a 3, 4, and 5-year-old, it would be the detailed answers that they'd give is so amazing that such a small mind is able to come up with these very detailed answers. So I just wanted to share some of that insight as an early educator with you as well. So continuing with the survey, again, does the public support legal protection for old growth forests? So there was a very, very high response for this. People want these forests to be protected. They want them to be able to thrive and grow without human interaction. We had several participants that were private forest owners, and we asked them what their hopes for the future were for their forests. And a high percentage was to keep it remaining as a natural forest, maximize, again, carbon sequestration to help fight the climate crisis, and to not prioritize wood production, logging, again, used for research, scientific research, and to let the next owners who may own their home decide what to do with it. There were no difference between the states that these participants were cataloged from. So in closing, natural preserves and old growth forests are very important to people who care about southern New England forests. They assume 20% of the landscape, which is strongly protected, and we want the less than 40% to be still protected. Over 99% support legal protection for old growth forests again. So these are just a few quotes that I wanted to leave you with. Save the children, save the trees, teach the children to save the trees. These are all quotes, by participants that were left from the survey. Having access to natural forests and vegetation is very important for both physical and mental well-being. Clean environments support all communities. Southern New England has some gorgeous woodlands, and everyone should be able to enjoy them. They should be protected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I have just a couple more slides. I want to show you some special things just from this area. And then Chelsea and I will be happy to answer some questions. So hang on, we have to do another little switcheroo. Excellent. So I think this is so I skipped a lot of the slides that I often show, which shows the benefits of nature for creativity, for reduced anxiety and depression, for reduced rumination, for children, for improved cognitive function and better emotional regulation. in favor of showcasing Chelsea and the Public Forest Survey, and also showing you some special things that we have just in this area, and also show you where are the wildlands, so you can really understand what I'm talking about. So this is from the Ethel Walker Woods. I thought it's a beautiful little scene, and the Ethel Walker Woods and several other forests in Simsbury are on the wildlands map because we have them under a policy called natural area stewardship, which is kind of like a medical approach of watchful waiting. If there's a problem, we fix it. Otherwise, we just fall in love with it. That's it. And so these areas of our land and water that are allowed to be natural areas, I consider them kind of like anchors on the landscape. Some of them are really special areas. They're like unicorns. And so damaging them would be damaging something that's irreplaceable. And I also consider them like our seed corn in terms of, our long-term future. And so this is in Simsbury. And this is in Hartford. This is on the North Branch of the Park River in Hartford. This is Austin Serio from the Urban Indigenous Collective. And this red oak that he's next to, I'm not sure if it's this one or another one, but there are trees there in Hartford that predate the Revolutionary War. And none of this really has any special protection. That's the problem. And that's the elephant. This area that Austin's standing in is this incredible remnant of old forest that's often called Goodwin's Wilds. And you can see it's right in between Scarborough Street and Homestead and Woodland down there. And it's remarkable. And Connecticut really has the oldest on average forests in New England, and mostly in northwestern Connecticut, but there's some very significant areas around here and even in Hartford. And I really became very much more motivated about this whole topic after my sabbatical at Harvard and during the pandemic with my students at Trinity, when I had wanted to go on some field trips and do other things, and we couldn't. And so I said, well, let's just study our campus and see what we have here. And Trinity's campus is amazing. We have some amazing trees. And my students said, well, why are we celebrating so many things at the college and ignoring these incredible trees? So I'm delighted to tell you that after seeing how much this meant to my students, I started working diligently with people at the college, and on our 200th anniversary in 2023, we declared the college campus as a level 1 arboretum and signaled our commitment to maintaining this and welcoming the public and showcasing amazing things like this. This tree right here is the champion English elm in Connecticut, and it's the champion in Connecticut's notable tree database. And we are lucky tonight to have Marty Allegata here, who is one of the most prolific champion and notable tree documenters in Connecticut. And he's done an incredible amount of work, and I would encourage you to check out Connecticut's notable tree database. The reason why I'm optimistic about this gloomy, scary things that I told you about at the beginning of my talk is we have a tremendous opportunity in New England to make some really strategic choices about what we're doing, where, and why. And this is a very simple bar chart of land use and allocation in New England. And if I just quickly go from left to right, red is developed, yellow is agriculture, all the green is forest, and gray is, I don't know, as yet undetermined what it is. And if you look at New England, and the ratios are a little bit different in Connecticut, you can see that most of the land is not developed or agriculture. Most of it is actually unconserved forest, woodland that's not dedicated as a wildland. But look at how little we have as a wildland, which is the dark green stripe down here. I guess pointer doesn't work on that. So most of New England is unconserved forest. And that's true in Connecticut as well, although we have more developed areas, a bit more agriculture. But a lot of it is unconserved forest. And if we can figure out how to shift some of our woodland to wildland, some of our unconserved woodland to conserved woodland, we can get a strategic network together. So if you want to look at where are just the wildlands, that little green stripe, here's where they are in all of southern New England, these green spots. You can see the Appalachian Trail, which is a yellow thread, which was originally developed as a wilderness way. And what you can see in Connecticut is we just have these little crumbs. I wouldn't call that a network. I would call that a shotgun approach, maybe. You can see poor Rhode Island. I don't want to block the screen, but the only piece we could find in Rhode Island is that speck right there of 20 acres. And the worst part, and I always get a little bit of a stomachache before I tell people this, so I have that right now. The worst part about this is all of these green spots, almost all of them, have only temporary protection. It's a management plan or a policy that could be reversed. So this already looks pretty grim. But if we look at the ownership and type of protection of all of these places, so here's the green turned into different colors depending on who owns the land and whether the protection is either considered a strong or a weak protection. And so what you can see is there's federal, state, municipal, conservation organization like land trusts, educational organizations are all represented here. And if their land has a current intent as a wildland, we put it on the map. If we remove the land that has just a weak protection as a wildland, which means it could be reversed, this is what we have for Connecticut. And this is what we have for Massachusetts. And we didn't have anything in Rhode Island to start with. So if anybody thinks that we can have healthy communities going forward with none of the land protected for natural processes, which means all of the land is thereby open by default to farming and forestry, which means plowing, cutting, herbicides, all that kind of stuff, which has its place, but not everywhere. We need to really grapple with this. I didn't do this map. This was done by a team at Harvard University in conjunction with several other research groups. I'm a co-author on the report, but I didn't make this map. I tried to find places to put on the map. That's what I tried to do. I did my best to prevent this. So, as I said, if we can shift some of our unconserved forests to conserved woodlands or wildlands, or shift some of our woodlands to wildlands, we can start to assemble a functional ecological lifeline for our communities. And I think that what we all need to do is try and get pieces on the map. I've been working with people in Massachusetts who have started a campaign, a collaborative campaign to try and get wildlands on the map. And it's something we need to talk about. It's not against anyone. It's for everyone. And we really don't have a future without planning for nature. And this quote by Wendell Berry, we can't know what we're doing until we know what nature would be doing if we were doing nothing. And that's why we need small native wildernesses widely dispersed over the countryside, as well as large ones in spectacular places. So another thing that I'm working on with a group called Restore the North Woods is a plan for new national parks, including national parks in New England, where our closest national park right now is in Acadia. So if we want everyone to have access to our natural heritage and to national parks, we're not doing a good job on the East Coast. And there's at least one in every state that we're proposing. So finally, I don't want this to be doom and gloom, because like I said, we have a tremendous opportunity. We just really need to think about what we're doing, where, and why. And I love this quote by Diana Beresford Kroger. She's a plant biologist, also biomedical training. She has a phenomenal film called Call of the Forest that I've shown here at the library on Earth Day a bunch of years ago, that an intact forest is a mighty act of peace. And I think we need to pull together on these issues that are nonpartisan and non-denominational and are about our land and our water and our future. And with that, I thank you tremendously for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. Yeah. So I could give you the mic. I could run around.
Oh, I can run around.
You might have questions.
I might have questions.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about the map, and I have two related questions. What's the difference between conserved woodland and conserved wildland?
A conserved? Yeah.
And then give it back for my second.
Okay. So a conserved woodland is typically an area that might be open to various forestry manipulation. So it could be open to habitat, creating, experimental habitats, different types of forestry, could be open to farming, could be, all that kind of stuff. So the definition of wildland is that there would be minimal human interference unless you really need to do something. So that would be the difference. So most of our conservation land is still open to all of those things. And that's good in some cases, but if it's something special like headwaters or a critical habitat or an old growth forest or other things, I think it really needs a higher level of protection because there's no restrictions on doing that stuff. Yeah.
And then what I noticed missing from the map when you wiped out some of the non-conserved or conserved woodlands areas was a lack of conserved wildlands in north central Connecticut where we live. And I thought that our land trust properties are conserved wildlands. Is that not true?
That is not true because the land is protected from development, but in most cases you could still log it, plow it, burn it, spray chemicals, do habitat experiments like clear cutting, things like that. So unless you put a more restrictive easement than a traditional conservation easement on the land, it is still open to all of those things. And a more restrictive easement would typically be called like a forever wild easement or putting additional restrictions in the original conservation easement. And I have some model documents if you're interested in that.
So what is Belden Forest considered?
So, okay, that's a great question. So I'm on the Open Space Committee, and we spent about 2 years writing a policy called Natural Area Stewardship. And it's a policy, it's currently a resource on Connecticut Land Conservation Coalition website. And it basically goes through the science of protecting natural areas, what would be a responsible way to take care of it, monitor it, deal with problems, like I said, you can deal with in wildlands, and then goes through examples of what are research natural areas with the Forest Service, national parks, what are other examples of wildlands. And so in Simsbury on Belden Forest, the Ethel Walker Woods, Onion Mountain, Darling Woods, and a couple of other properties, we put this policy called Natural Area Stewardship on it. And that policy qualified those forests in Simsbury for the wildlands map. And in fact, because we have these forests on the wildlands map, we're one of the top 50 wildlands holders in New England. And in fact, I think one of only 2 towns that has any land on the wildlands map. Belden Forest actually has an extra level of protection because it was the first forest in Connecticut that was entered into the Old Growth Forest Network. So as part of that process, the town also signed like a memorandum of understanding with the Old Growth Forest Network that says that it intends to let it be an old growth forest. And that's consistent with the deed associated with the Belden Forest, which is like literally a stone's throw from here, if you don't know it. Because Belden Forest was donated by two women, and I forgot their names right now, but they said that they wanted it to remain in a heavily wooded state forever for the town, and for a certain number of years after they left it, remaining family members could take out a certain amount of their own firewood for a bunch of years, but those family members have all passed on. So that's the deal with Belden Forest.
So it's just too small to show up on the map.
It is on the map, actually. It's going to be like a speck, like Rhode Island. So if you see this little, it's like the Seven Sisters, the constellation. These little tiny blue specks are the forests in Simsbury that are protected by this policy. But that policy could be reversed. Like if I get run over by a truck and Marjorie Winter, falls off a cliff, it could be a problem in town. Oh, yeah.
And what I didn't previously say in the survey is that 99% of our participants did support old growth protection and supporting forests as a forever wild and a clause for that and like protecting them. So I didn't get to highlight that. So I think that's a really important piece of data to keep in mind. Any other questions? Oh, wow, lots of hands. I'm going to start. For me? Okay.
Yes. We saw different Chelsea when you started talking about teaching. How much do you love teaching and how much do you love science?
Well, that's a pretty difficult question to answer. I love both, and I try to integrate as much as I can without overwhelming my students who are at a very young age and still learning self-regulation. But I have integrated into my classroom what we call OLE, so like our outside time. I really make it a point. I let them, play, but more often than not, given the weather, we go on mindful walks very often. We actually categorize and write down the things that we hear, that we feel. I'm very dedicated to teaching. However, I do miss being at Trinity and being in a lab and, studying and working towards things like this and protecting our land. But our children are the future. I know that's a very cliche thing to say, but I do feel like I am making some progress and teaching them to appreciate nature and to understand why it's so important. I actually nannied for about 4 years a set of twin girls who are literal tree huggers. So I'm very proud of that. But thank you for asking. I think you had a question?
Yeah. I'm a little curious about how the state forests fit into this picture.
Yep.
So some of our state forests have a subset of their area based on their current management plan is listed as Old Forest Management Site, which means it's reserved from logging. So that Old Forest Management subset of a state forest is not open to logging during the time period that management plan is in effect. So it's not permanent. So that's considered temporary protection. And most state forests don't have any old forest management sites within them. So if you look at state, here's some of the areas down here in our state forests. And I wanted to follow up on what Chelsea mentioned about how people want to protect old growth forests. Even old growth forests have no protection. It's kind of shocking.
Well, I'm a little confused as to, are you saying that nothing nothing really is permanently protected. Things can be turned around. And that would be number one. And number two, I guess I was thinking like of when you were mentioning Onion Mountain and the various, which I think are land trusts here, right? Is Onion Mountain?
That's owned by the town.
The town, okay. But is there, as far as I know, we have active management in the sense of trying to remove invasives and that kind of thing, which to me wouldn't mean wildland. Is that correct? I mean, I'm thinking of when they say, my idea of a wildland was when it's really untouched by, or what is that called if that's not wildland? Yeah.
A wildland could be someplace that it has a rule that nobody can do anything ever, but of the wildlands that are on the map and that are in the report, there's a wide range of allowable activities. So you could deal with invasives, you can deal with trails, you might be able to hunt, you might be able to snowmobile, you can do all of those kinds of things. So within the category of wildlands, there's a lot of flexibility within that category. It could mean something that you don't allow anything. That's quite rare though. But most land, even if it's protected from development, which means it can't be paved or built on, is still open to farming and forestry. So that's sort of the default state of most conservation easements. It takes a special conservation easement typically to protect a wildland, or a deed, or a statute, or some other kind of document. And the land that's on here that's considered to have strong protection, so like in gray, this is land that's owned by the National Park Service along the Appalachian Trail. This other gray piece right here is Canaan Mountain Wilderness Area, which is owned by the state, but it has its own kind of special statute category. There's another area in Massachusetts. This is an Audubon property called like Watley or something like that. But those are considered strong protection by national rules governing some of the National Park Service land. That's a special donation, and this is a special state statute. The rest of these are all management plans or policies. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think I'm thinking of also beyond us, national parks in general and everything, how well.
Yeah, national park.
And, different administrations come in and kind of turn around. Oh, we thought this was a national park, but no, we're not going to let it be a national park.
So I'll just explain that a tiny bit. So the land with kind of the highest protection really is national parks and federal wilderness areas. National monuments have less protection than national parks. There's a whole kind of gradation of stuff. And if you look at, popularity with the public, national parks are extremely popular, extremely bipartisan. You can't take them away with a swipe of a pen. There's usually a big fight. We don't want a national park. And then like 5 years later, they're like, yippee, we have a national park. So, Camilla.
I'm looking at the map of Connecticut and it looks so bleak. And yet, I'm just thinking of the Metacomet Trail and all the different parcels of land that go really cover almost a corridor in the entire state. But I know they're owned by a variety of different groups. And so how does that fit into this?
Okay. So do you want to ask your question? Then I'll ask both at the same time.
It's a different question.
It's a different question. Okay, well, okay. So this is why we have really a tremendous opportunity, because if we decided that, those trails, the buffer around the Appalachian Trail, the Metacomet National Scenic Trail, some of these incredible, forested corridors that are going up here. this is the tremendous opportunity, is to decide what areas are we going to say, this is where we're doing forestry, this is where we're doing experiments, this is where we're leaving for development and for energy, and what are the special areas that we should not be doing that unless there's a really good reason. And I would say there's a fairly common sense list of really important stuff, and it centers on water. So our headwaters. You mess up the headwaters, you're having an impact on the entire watershed. You're damaging cold water fisheries and everything like that. So start with the headwaters, protect the small streams, the wetlands, the vernal pools, our wild and scenic rivers. Start with the water and make that the backbone of our strategic network of nature. And then besides the water, we also need sufficient areas of habitat. There's 13 imperiled habitats in Connecticut, and there's even more what's called critical habitats. None of them really have any special protection. We should put those places on the map. Core forests, where the full range of species is allowed to thrive there. Some species need a fairly large area to roam. Where are we going to let those species live? And also, we need to think about connectivity on the landscape because species need to move as climate conditions change, et cetera. And so we can't leave them in little islands, This is just not a connected and functional network. And I know this is shocking, and that's why I get a stomachache before I tell people about it.
How would a landowner go about getting a conservation easement?
So a landowner could get a Forever Wild conservation easement if they wanted to work with a land trust or a town or an entity. It could be an educational institution or something. It would have to be an entity that would be willing to hold that conservation easement. Yeah, maybe. Exactly. Yep, exactly.
Is there just a hodgepodge of different groups that make all these decisions about what can potentially be done for and with these patches? Who decides?
You mean the patches that are on the map right now? We're hoping to get more on the map, but these patches are controlled by these owners here. So that's how, that's who controls whether that patch stays in a wildlands intent or not. And what I'd also like to say is there is a lot of land on here that's currently acting as a wildland. A lot of our land trust land, a lot of our town lands is currently acting as a wildland, but it has no specific intent. So that means that at any point they could decide, okay, we're going to clear cut this, or we're going to do this or do that, even if it's something special, like the special things I just named to you, because people don't know. And I'll just tell you, in Simsbury, it was years of work because we had logging plans for the Ethel Walker Woods, Belden Forest, Onion Mountain, and the forest on Stratton Brook. That's what was going to happen. So it took years of trying to say, what's the reason we're doing this? Is it necessary? Are we going to create more costs when all the invasives move in? There's soil erosion. The deer are going to eat all the baby trees. So we're getting $13,000 for cutting down this forest. For what?
So you said that plans were underway for those forests, or cutting them or whatever, but who in Simsbury was it the town government that makes those plans, or?
So the plans usually plans for forest management are done because it's like this is what you're supposed to do, is get a forest management plan. And then those forest management plans typically suggest manipulating, cutting, doing stuff to the forest. Whether it's always necessary and whether what good it's doing is also creating other problems, I don't think there's often a full thinking through of what really the implications are. I've written some research papers on this, and I had no bias when I got into this issue. All I knew is I had spent 10 years of my life protecting the Ethel Walker Woods, and I knew a lot about those woods and the special species that were there and why the bird species that typically only live in Vermont are there, because it's a big, cool woods, and all of its connections to other habitat and all kinds of stuff. And so then when I realized, after I spent 10 years getting donations and votes and all of the grants and all of that the town had a plan to log it. And I said, well, why are we doing this? And they said, we hired a professional, and this is what they recommend. And I said, well, I'm a professional. I can talk to other professionals, and I just want to get a second opinion. That's all I said. I just want to get a second opinion because we can't get it back, and we should be really sure after we just spent $13.85 million on this that we're doing the right thing. And so that's basically how all of this started, was asking for a second opinion. And then I started talking to a lot of people and trying to figure out, and they said, well, if the town intends this to be an area that we're getting lumber or this kind of stuff, then yes, they should log it. But all of the other things that are the goals of this management plan will happen over time on their own without human intervention. And of the 8 goals on the management plan, the only one that for sure will be achieved will be you will sell enough lumber to pay for the management plan. So that, and then I realized over time that what's happening in a lot of cases is you're creating pathways for more invasives, which is already a problem. And I knew that was one of the reasons why I had my antenna up, because the areas that have been logged in the Ethel Walker Woods are the areas where the invasives are. So I thought, why are we going to spread this problem, which we've just been trying to do, hand-by-hand battle with for years? So that was already, made me think like, well, we don't want to spread this problem. And the other thing that it brings is more ticks, which is a public health issue. So there's all these negative outcomes that no one ever talks about. And so it's just a habit we're in, that every forest needs to be managed. And literally, people think, and maybe some of you think, that a forest can't survive without human management. That is how deeply people believe that forests need us to take care of them. And what I'm telling you is, if we keep on doing all this trimming and cutting and spraying and stuff like that, we are losing our buffer system. That's it. Marjorie. Yes.
So I just wanted to, these wonderful forests that we have preserved and, are in wildlands and all, they still have invasive species in them that we need to address. And unfortunately, it is not the town that is addressing them. It is volunteers who are addressing them. So if you've seen any activity over at Onion Mountain, it is volunteers, just like people in this room, who go out there and chop things down. There is no budget in the town for doing this, or it's very tiny budget, very tiny. So it would be nice for all of you to say, we would like the forest to be managed for invasives. That would really, if that could get up through the budget process, up to the Board of Finance, up to the Board of Selectmen, that would be really helpful. Because there's only so much the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the senior citizens of Simsbury can do to go out there. And if you think weeding your yard is hard, try weeding a forest. But actually, the invasive management starts in your own yard. If you have these invasive plants in your yard, they will spread to the forest. And that is one of the biggest threats that I see in our forest. Even if we leave them alone, those species will come in. because there will be ice storms, there will be blowdowns in those open areas. Because we have so many of these invasive species in our own yards, they are going to be taken in by the bird. The birds will eat the seeds and drop them in nice little fertilized packages in the woods. So if you have a burning bush, if you have a Japanese barberry, if you have honeysuckles, the non-native, the whole thing. I know the Simsbury Land Trust just sent out a lovely book to each and every one of you. And if you don't have that, if you didn't keep it, let us know. We have more copies. But this spring, take out those plants in your yard. Yes, some right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marjorie is doing a phenomenal job. Excellent. And if you see that sign at Onion Mountain, that's Marjorie's doing to try and deal with the burning bush there. So I realize it's time to wrap up, and I'm willing to stay and chat. You're welcome to pick up a copy of the executive summary. I also brought some bear deterrent whistles if anyone needs a bear deterrent whistle, and some bungee cords if you leave your trash outside and want to secure it from the bears. And I'd also, and the raccoons and all that stuff, exactly. And I also wanted to announce that I'm president of the Simsbury Grange, and I know some of you here have come to the Beaver Pond Wildlife Series. We're doing the full series again this year, first Fridays starting in April, which I believe is April 7th. It'll be Beaver Pond Wildlife, Episode 1. There won't be any doom and gloom talk. It's just going to all be wildlife. It's gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. And Chelsea, did you have any last words?
I do. I just want to encourage you all to encourage your friends, your family, your neighbors to speak up on these issues. Make it known to them that their voices are important, and if we all work together, we can get lots more spots on this map. I also want to say, please encourage the little ones in your lives to put down an iPad, put down an electronic device. Encourage them to go outside, ask them open-ended questions. Just really, if you show that you're interested and excited, they will pick up on that energy. I just can't advocate enough for electronic devices to be put away and for leaves and sticks and rocks to be put in their hands instead. If you need any ideas, I am a plethora of lesson plans and easy crafts of nature materials. So again, please don't feel that you have to just worry about the adults in your life. Please talk to the children in your life about this too. Thank you.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.